Welcome to Edge Studio 30 Live. I'm John Dioso, the editor of Edge Studio 30. Today, we're going to discuss how data can lead to better ROI and measurement in an uncertain economy. As customer behavior becomes digital first, marketers have embraced equally critical dual mandates: customer satisfaction and growth. Data is the foundation of both of these objectives, whether it's to personalize customer experiences and build trusted relationships, or to optimize the return on investment of campaigns and programs. Joining me today to discuss how data impacts marketers' investments and strategic shifts, and help point the way forward for digital marketing are Loretta Shen, Senior Director of Product Marketing of Salesforce, and Marty Kihn, Senior VP of Product Strategy Marketing Cloud at Salesforce. Loretta and Marty, hello.
Hi, John.
Hey, John.
Hey, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Of course. Thanks, Loretta. And also welcome everybody out there. Thank you for joining us. Please drop us a note and tell us where you are in the world so we can give you a shout out later. All right, Loretta and Marty, let's get into this. So, okay, we have about 25 minutes or so. Either of you can take this one or you can both tag team on it. Take as much time as you need, but not too much because we have a bunch of other questions to get to. How have the past 2 years of disruption affected digital marketing? So, Loretta, if you want to take that first, or Marty, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, I think we're all very familiar with like the cyclical economic conditions from COVID back to growth now, back to, kind of more uncertain times, inflation, et cetera. So kind of these like larger macroeconomic trends have been highly disruptive, but also with the marketing ecosystem, a lot of different big changes like privacy trends, regulations, et cetera, that have made marketers kind of have to reevaluate, like, what are my budgets? Like, how am I changing my measurement strategy? How can I I think a big theme that we've seen at Salesforce is accelerate my digital transformation because everything's moving online and I need to be where my customers are. And so I think at a high level, there's just been a lot going on that just impact, like how do you build your strategies? How do you make investments in technology so that you can kind of meet your customers where they are? And I think from my perspective, kind of talking data and analytics with our customers every day, I think data and measurement is coming really a lot more into focus, especially first-party data, marketing-owned data, and customer data as well. So how do you continue to know your customers when you don't necessarily have reliance on that third-party cookie, or, now that you're trying to kind of make the most of your digital engagements with them? And so we actually did a study earlier this year with marketing leaders, data-focused marketers, and 90% of marketers said that recent data privacy changes have fundamentally changed how they measure performance. So like I said, they're revising customer data collection, marketing budgets, personalization strategies, and performance KPIs and goals. And I think, one very obvious example is with email, where a key KPI used to be opens. This is now less relevant with, the mail privacy changes from Apple, with the default to no tracking across iOS devices. So that's just kind of like a high level of, what we're seeing on our end. But Marty, I'm sure you have a lot to add there too.
Well, I mean, I think a lot changed, and it's marketing. I always get in trouble when I say this, but I think marketing is a harder time than other functions. So I work in a marketing cloud as you do, Loretta, and we have to adapt to something that's very difficult to predict, which is consumer behavior. And I think over the last 2 years, we've seen massive changes in behavior and also in attitudes. And I think the other thing that's difficult is we can't go back in time and see what we couldn't predict because everything looks obvious looking backwards. So I think in the last 2 years, we've seen 65% growth in commerce sales on same-site sales. So just massive switch to digital channels, but also the opening up of whole new channels that in the past weren't actually particularly digital. I mean, something like car sales. You could do an end-to-end purchase of a vehicle and it can arrive on your lawn and you don't have to go to the showroom anymore. I have a neighbor who actually bought a house and didn't actually go to the house. Now, if we went back 5 or 10 years, somebody would have thought that person was absolutely insane. But the other thing is that consumer behavior has, our expectations have changed as well. We expect personalization, but we also don't want to surrender data for personalization. So there's ongoing tension that Loretta alluded to. And I think that we've become more and more demanding over time, and we don't even know it. So I think that, we have we've heard that 1 in 3 customers will switch after a single bad experience. So we're less tolerant of any kind of friction in any sort of experience, not just in marketing, but, like a commerce experience.
And not to mention, you brought up before the changing customer behavior. I mean, it behooves to mention the pandemic. Obviously, I mean, we're sick of living in it, but that very example that you brought up before about buying a car, of course, it makes a lot more sense when you're worried about traveling to a dealership, being face to face with people that you don't really know, and them breathing all over you or breathing all over them. Suddenly, that weird proposition, which seemed bizarre a few years ago, that you could actually order a car and have it delivered to your house and do all that without having seen a person or met a person in person before, it makes a lot more sense. And it wasn't
It's
such
more
a
mundane.
strange
Even like
idea.
my mom orders her groceries now online, and that was, believe me, unthinkable 5 years ago.
And the way that ties into the data, obviously, all of a sudden, an entire new customer base of people who were not digital before, who were not in the e-commerce ecosystem, are suddenly part of that. Percentage-wise, as you said before, there's so much more percentage of people that are doing this, online. I think that leads perfectly into the next question. So, the whole new data privacy has been something that's been, top of mind also, in addition to everything else that's happened in a couple of years. So you referred to this before a little bit before, Loretta. How has that changed the strategies, and how have these changes affected the channels? I think Marty also talked about this a little bit more. I'd like to get a little bit more into that. So which channels are marketers investing more in, and what are they not investing? What are they taking the dollars away from now?
We do have some data.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Loretta.
Yeah, from our same recent marketing intelligence report, I think it's nothing surprising, but makes sense based off just even the few examples we just went through. From a channel perspective, we're seeing increase in digital channels like paid social, so all of the different social media networks, whether it's the Meta network or TikTok or Google, like continuing to see investment from marketers to just try to meet their customers as they are on the web. And then also just across devices. So mobile marketing is really big. And then these larger web experiences. So creating end-to-end experiences, no matter what industry, like car shopping, or if you're kind of a financial broker, so that you can service your customer online. I think all the investment is kind of moving in that direction. Conversely, I think legacy channels such as traditional TV and radio advertising are continuing to see more divestment, but we're seeing a move towards connected TV. And so I think there's a lot of innovation going on, but more, again, in that kind of more digital space. And again, I think makes sense given the continued trend into digital mediums as we all continue to shop and do business online.
Yeah, I mean, we did, some of it was not surprising. I think our information show that, for instance, out of home and events investment have decreased, but that's just because we live less of our life in real life. IRL, is that it? IRL. But even more broadly, I think
And Marty, you haven't left that room in 2 years, right?
Absolutely not. No, I changed the background, but but even more broadly, I think we as consumers are much more aware now of data in general. I think 5, 10, 15 years ago, most of us didn't really think about what data was being collected, at least specifically or any deep way. But now we are aware of it. We have to be aware of it. Regulators have made us aware. But even in our sort of digital surfing and using apps, we are much more aware of the data that's been collected. And we've seen 48% of the response to that survey have stopped buying from a brand over concerns specifically about privacy and their own data privacy. So it raises the premium on the trust and the feeling of trust that consumers have with a particular brand. And it behooves the brand itself, and I know a lot of them are aware of this, but to present themselves as a kind of a trusted but also transparent brand. So we're being very clear about the data we're collecting, but we're also showing you how what the purpose is that we're using it for. And that conversation is, I think, new in the world of at least the kind of mainstream consumer.
Right, and I think that also goes perfect. So I have a follow-up to that, Marty, which is talking about the way that data is being collected now. What is the value proposition with consumers now? So we've talked about this before, but just for today's audience, is the cookieless future already here? And if it is, what are the enormous changes that will radically alter how marketers acquire and analyze data, and how will those changes affect their strategies?
Yeah, I remind people, so it was only January 2020, when Google Chrome, issued the blog post heard around the world, and they said that they were going to deprecate third-party cookie in the Chrome browser, which has been extended now until late next year at some point. But we called it cookie apocalypse, and then of course, the pandemic happened, and it was put into perspective. So it's not exactly a cookie apocalypse. But it's not all about the cookie. I mean, Loretta alluded to cookies, mobile ad IDs, it's IP addresses, it's even in some cases email address isn't being shared as an identifier. But I did a quick calculation about cookied media, and it's less than 10% of like any big media buy now for a large advertiser is in a cookie medium, like specifically the Chrome browser. So we are, to answer your question directly, we are in the cookieless future already, and we have been there for some time. Safari didn't they were deprecating cookies up about half a decade ago. So we have been transitioning away from these anonymous opt-in by default user IDs, and marketers have had to adapt to them. But I think that there's been widespread implications for that. The main one, kind of the bottom line for all of this, is the emphasis on first-party data and what we're talking about. Data collected from customers in a transparent and open way, as part of an exchange of value, and that's important even for media. Even for media targeting, you need a core set of first-party IDs as a seed to send over to the walled gardens and send over to these retail media networks in order to find people who look like them. So the future of the cookie is, in some ways, customer data, actually.
Loretta, do you have anything you want to
It's
add
not
to
a
that?
one-to-one substitute, but it's it's an analogy. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good segue into just how our analytics strategy is changing, because we're talking a lot about the importance and the rise in importance of first-party data or own data. So that could be anything from like site analytics data, your CRM data, your email data, lead form fills, call center data, sales data, et cetera. And now marketers are increasingly starting to incorporate these data sources into their analytics. So you used to maybe just measure like how many impressions, views, et cetera. But now you can actually focus more on outcomes. Like, what were these conversions? What was the impact on customer service? What was the impact on sales? More than just top level KPIs. And so, actually just in prepping for this conversation, was speaking to one of our amazing solutions architects, Marco, who's seen like hundreds of implementations. And I think marketers are getting really specific with their analyses. In B2B, for example, a good example is customers are bringing together granular email data with sales data and their customer data, their CRM data, so that they can see exactly how email is kind of helping them acquire leads and eventual sales. And then breaking down performance by industry, specific accounts, different programs, even internal account owners, campaigns. So you can get super specific with what you're analyzing when you have that first party data incorporated into your measurement strategy. And in B2C, like when you're looking at maybe commerce, we see marketers bringing together a number of different first party data sources, including point of sale, in-stores data, loyalty data, for their returning customers, any sort of internal customer database. And of course, like CDPs, and specifically Salesforce CDP, we see a lot of customers starting to use this super valuable data that they can link marketing, email engagement to their customer outcomes and maximize performance. And I think the main message here in general is that with these new analytic strategies, marketers can splice super valuable data. They're collecting, and to Marty's point earlier, marketers are collecting data all over the place. They have to kind of have a hand in every single department, the entire customer journey, so they can splice, valuable marketing data, product data, sales data with their customer data to gain a better understanding of the impact of all of their investments, all of their marketing efforts on the customer experience, build those amazing customer journeys and moments, but ultimately drive ROI, which I think is also something that we're focused on as well, right? You need to be accountable to your business and find that uncertainty in what you're doing, and then be able to say, hey, this program led to this type of customer satisfaction, but also ultimately it's helping drive our business so we can reinvest and continue to innovate throughout any economic environment and really prove the value of marketing.
Now, I want to get back to ROI a little bit later, but since you brought up CDPs, I know a guy who knows a little bit of something about CDPs. Marty,
My
how do
favorite
CDPs
topic.
address
Yes. Oh my God, I love
how do CDPs address all these challenges as Loretta was getting into? Get a little bit deeper into that. But then I also want you to get into, is the rise of retail media networks the future of e-commerce? And, in other words, will every brand or with a website become a publisher or a media network?
The answer is yes. Yes and yes. I did actually co-author a book called Customer Data Platforms, which is widely available.
Get out of town.
I mentioned that in passing. But yeah, CDPs, I mean, what they do is they organize customer data. So we were talking about first party data, zero party data, how it's so important. And, there's so many channels, and it tends to be, the data picture tends to be messy at most organizations. And the bigger ones, the older ones, retailers who have online and offline presence tend to have more customer data sitting in more different siloed systems. And CDP is supposed to, the purpose of it is to bring it together, to create a unified profile. So conceptually, it's quite simple. The technology has continued to improve, and it's an important, and it's a core component of a lot of MarTech stacks today. I think the retail media question is an interesting one. I mean, what we've seen is it started with social networks. So Meta, Facebook and Instagram, they monetize through advertising, and the way they can do that is because people log in, so they have an authenticated user base. They can see what people are doing, and they can kind of put them into useful segments for advertisers, and it's a really great place to advertise. But that's moved beyond into retailers. So retailers realized, Amazon being a great example, but in Europe as well, Ball and Tesco and Alibaba and so on. Large retail networks also have the same thing. People log in, they exhibit behaviors, and they also have this amazing data asset, which is the outcome. What did they actually do? They actually bought something. So you can go end to end, in a sense, in a retail network where you can't in a social network. People don't tend to buy things within Facebook, and it's extended into health and not health so much, but travel and leisure, like Marriott. They announced recently they have all those screens in hotel rooms, so that can be a network, and they can monetize that, and they have a loyalty program. And so I think the future, anyone who has a clean data asset like that, authenticated, people have opted in for data collection, they have attention, and they also have some kind of outcome measurement, has a very, very valuable asset, and a lot of them are exploring certainly monetizing it. So.
Great. And, if you're just joining us, this is at a Studio 30 Live. I'm John Dioso, the editor of Studio 30, and I'm here with Loretta, Shen, and Marty Kihn from Salesforce, and we're discussing how data can lead to better ROI and measurement in an uncertain economy. But before we get back to the conversation, I'd love to shout out some people who are watching us today. We've got Craig from New York. Nice. Hello, Craig. Didi from Missouri, and Fusio and Vivek from India. There you go. Hey, Didi. Welcome. All right. Thank you guys for joining us. You don't have to say hello to Marty. All right, Loretta. Aloha. Question for Loretta. Let's go back to what we were talking about ROI before. What are the key obstacles that prevent most marketers from accessing their data with the speed necessary to drive conversions across categories? And what changes can marketers implement now to achieve the speed to insight they need to achieve their goals?
Yeah, I mean, I think, throughout this conversation, we've just been throwing out different data sources and different types of media, different types of engagements that marketers can now activate because we're all online. And I think so there's a deluge of data for marketers, but access really starts with getting to the source of data and making it available to use. And so because it's digital, it's also a little bit more technical. Like you're trying to connect across different platforms. And so marketers are not only dealing with a ton of data, but it's often siloed and in different places, different platforms. And so from the get-go, they need to try to get that all together, tie it together across sources to turn it into actionable insights. So it's like a bit of a technical challenge to begin. And so we're actually talk to our marketers, our customers every day around, what are your pain points? And it starts with challenges across data integration and management. So that means like, how do you integrate data from aligned business units, even internally? So again, I think the most obvious examples are from your sales team, from your CRM team, or from your product team. Like, how do you incorporate those into your marketing so that you actually know what you're trying to achieve? You're not just doing marketing for the sake of marketing, but you're trying to drive product adoption. You're trying to drive sales. And then another is, of course, data preparation across sources. So it's not as simple as saying like, hey, I just want to join, I want to see how Facebook is performing versus Google, but you have to actually bring those together and make sure that you're making an apples to apples comparison. And then when you start to look at that across business units, across product lines, even across international regions, you start to introduce more into your analysis, like different currencies or different metrics. And so really it's all about kind of like, how do you stitch things together? How do you prepare data to make it so that you can actually then gain insight? And then this relates to then challenges around how do you get insights quickly enough to apply learnings to marketing strategies? So that's kind of one of the big challenges with analysis is just like, because you have all these challenges with just kind of integrating your data? How do you get it more quickly to that analysis phase? And then start to connect marketing investments to business outcomes or other business data, such as sales and product. And then start to then use that data to optimize in real time, make in-flight changes to your campaigns, and start to drive cross-channel marketing insights. So you can kind of have that holistic view of, this is my whole marketing strategy, and these are the places that I need to improve. These are the parts of the customer journey that need my attention. And here's where I can divest and make the most of my budget. So I think end to end, you see these problems kind of through the whole life cycle of the marketing data, from the data source all the way to insight, and then how it's used. So in order to solve these challenges, I think really it's around needing to adopt a data quality focused mindset, which was actually one of the top factors identified in our recent study to driving both marketing-led growth and ROI and the customer experience. So to ensure data quality, marketers, again, need to embrace that kind of data preparation mindset of best practices, like how do you map your data together, have a marketing data model, how do you automate data connections, are you classifying your data, are you using naming conventions, which is kind of like the secret weapon and best friend or frenemy of marketers overall, just to make sure like everything you do is kind of tagged, has a purpose. And all of this can be made easier with technology, of course, and with measurement analytics platforms, and also again having something like a CDP to help you kind of make that process of understanding your customers easier. Because I think once you have that solid foundation across your marketing performance data, your customer data, you can then tackle incorporating any new data source, such as your first party data, as well as start activating data across, using that data and activating it across marketing and advertising channels, so that you can really realize that vision of personalized experiences across the entire customer journey. So I know that it was a lot, but it's kind of, throughout the whole life cycle of data and the customer experience, you need to kind of try to bring it together so that you can really have a full view into your strategy.
Well, there's a lot. I'm going to follow up with something.
Can I add
sorry,
a build?
Marty, go ahead.
One more thing.
Absolutely. Yep.
That was a lot, but there's more. There's more.
There's more. Yeah, wait, but there's more.
I think what's happened in marketing over the years is, different channels have spun up in response to consumer behavior that drives everything. So mobile becomes a thing, mobile analytics, and they have their own application, and then social, and then the web, and websites and personalization. Now we have influencers, we have an influencer team. And so that's meant two things. One is like what Loretta's saying, siloed data systems. That's true, it needs to be organized, but there's also siloed teams. And so there's a change management piece as well. Generally, the social team and the email team probably don't talk to each other. Why would they? But they need to. If you're going to form a single view of the customer, you're going to have coherent customer experience. So there's kind of a team change management piece that has to go alongside the data and technology rationalization.
Great. And we have a few minutes left, but just quickly, Loretta, I just wanted to follow up with one thing from what you were saying before, which was, you mentioned cross-channel, and you also mentioned your study. Was there anything in your study that could give any insights to the audience for what do other marketers think about, what does the general audience think about how close we are to finally achieving that true cross-channel, marketing alignment, where, people can actually, get the right type of insights that they need to finally get the right ROI?
I mean, I think we're on a good path. Like you definitely see marketers starting to tackle these challenges. I think we still see, one of the big stats was kind of only about a third of marketers feel that they can actually gain insights quickly enough to make impactful decision making. And part of that is because you want to look beyond just one data source. You want to align teams, like Marty was saying, and create that full customer view. So I think, we're probably in early maturity in terms of larger marketing teams kind of adopting this like holistic view across departments, across different channels. But I would say we're just definitely on the right path. So I think it's harder to quantify exactly how far we are as an industry, but I think, we're starting to see a focus looking forward for marketers on, how a top priority, for example, for marketing performance is real-time data access and creating customer journey analytics. So a lot of marketers are putting that as like their top priorities for this coming year. And then on the other side of the customer experience, we're seeing a lot of people start to adopt the best practices so that you can start to gain first-party data. So building loyalty programs, customer consent management programs, so that you can do things like personalized content and offers.
Okay, and then we have a little bit of time left. We have about a minute or two, and when we do that, I want to combine a couple of ideas here. So, obviously, one of the reasons why we always talk about the cookieless future in the post-cookie world is that people have kind of been freaking out about it a little bit. So, I want to go into that a little bit more. Just, why is everybody freaking out about it? Because we mentioned before, Marty, as you said, it's 10% of people are using these third-party cookie identifiers, et cetera. But still, it's a significant amount, enough that people were freaking out about it. So, okay, should they be? And what is the solution to that? But then let's end on something good so we can both weigh in on this. Why is everybody freaking out? But then what is the good news? So, Marty, why don't you go first, and then Loretta can weigh in.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the freak out is just that, the commercial internet was invented in 1995. So the Netscape browser became a thing, and then cookies were a third-party cookie were opted in by default. You could control them in the browser, but that was the default. So we've had 27 years or 25 plus years of using this identifier, for advertising, and we could use it for site personalization and for measurement. And all of a sudden, it seems like in the past 5 years, that's all changing. So we're going to lose it. And so I think that the freak out is not specific to the cookie. It's just in general. What are the rules? What do I as marketer have to work with? Can I use the IP address? Can't I? Do we have to have an opt-in screen for everything? So that's the question. And it's a good question. And we're in a period of transition. Periods of transition are uncomfortable. So that's what we're all feeling. But the good news is I think where we end up will be better. It will be something that we've worked out. It will have been designed for use rather than the kludgy system of pixel syncing that we've had for 25 years. We'll have something that's rational that we've kind of all at least agreed to disagree on. And so we'll know what we're dealing with. And so I think where we're going is better. We saw that with GDPR just briefly. Is like as soon as the people are upset about GDPR, the rules come out. We know what the rules are. And in Europe, in fact, people are less concerned about these things than we are in the US, where we don't have any national privacy legislation. So I think in a way, rules are good, and that's where we're going, and it will be better.
Loretta?
Yeah, I think definitely consumer first, consumer forward, privacy forward policies are great for the end customers and even us as individuals. So I think it's a net positive for everyone to kind of continue to create this kind of healthy ecosystem of trading your time and your resources for services and goods. And I think we're also seeing positive reinforcement on the role of marketing. So it's not just kind of like your traditional brand advertising, but again, marketing has a real big role now in building that customer experience. And kind of being at the forefront of all this change makes marketers the most prepared to adapt to the new digital customer. And on that other note of the ecosystem, we've been forced to innovate because we're constantly in flux. And so it's a fast moving industry. We're seeing a lot of different technology kind of being developed to help us meet these privacy challenges, create these new consumer privacy focused experiences, and seeing continued investment in everything that we do in the marketing and advertising space. So we were chatting about this early, kind of in another call, but we're seeing, Netflix is now investing in an ad model. And that's a good sign, I think, in terms of advertising is a great way to help you drive your business. And then we'll continue to see investment in streaming technology. And so the downstream effects are really great. I think the advertising ecosystem has a big role to play here in continuing to make sure that we have a really strong technology ecosystem overall. And so I'm excited for that.
All right. Well, thank you for bringing the news in. I love bringing it all back to the news, and thank you for some good news from you guys. That's all the time we have for today. But thank you to Loretta Shen, Senior Director of Product Marketing at Salesforce, and Marty Kihn, Senior VP of Product Strategy at Marketing Cloud at Salesforce, for joining me. And most of all, thanks everybody out there for joining us for Ad Age Studio 30 Live. I'm John Dioso. See you next time.